Hey everyone, and welcome to The Rational Republican, a podcast where we look at complex issues facing us here in Oregon and around the nation. We'll try to address issues from a nonpartisan perspective and view our disagreements through a lens of respect rather than tribalism or divisiveness. I'm James Ball. This is Nick Perlasky.
Hey listeners, how we doing?
Today's podcast is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors. ProLift is your one-stop shop for residential and small commercial garage doors, from openers, springs, and rollers to full reinstalls. They offer same-day service on all garage door repairs with no extra charge for evenings or weekends. Serving the greater Portland metro area, call today and set up your free estimate at 503-558-6349 or at proliftdoors.com/Portland. Again, that's 503-558-6349 or proliftdoors.com/Portland. A quick update before we get started. In the episode, we talk about how Alex had submitted his application to become the treasurer for the Oregon Republican Party and then had withdrawn it. Well, this was recorded on the Wednesday before the convention. The following Saturday, a few days later, there was some parliamentary stuff that happened, and Alex was actually nominated from the floor of the meeting, and he was elected 52-50. So Alex is now the treasurer for the Oregon Republican Party. So congratulations, Alex. And with that, we hope you enjoy the episode. On this episode of the podcast, we have Alex McHaddad. He is the former chairman of the Union County Republicans, and that's my third attempt at that, and I still butchered his last name, which is silly because I've known you for a couple of years now. So I apologize for that. Say it for the listeners. How do you pronounce your last name?
My family always pronounces it McHaddad.
McHaddad. Okay.
Yeah, kind of the anglicized way to.
I don't know why I was having a hard time with that. But anyway,
former the Scottish Arabic hybrid, and there's only like 20 of us in the world. So
got it.
Awesome combo. Good man.
So former chairman of the Union County Republicans, treasurer for the Young Republicans, correct?
Yep.
And was running for treasurer of the Oregon Republican Party before you pulled your name and are no longer running for that position. And that, so this will air on Saturday, and I believe that is actually the election when you would have been, on the ballot had you still been in. So welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. And why don't you take a couple minutes to introduce yourself and fill in all this stuff I left out.
Well, thanks, James and Nick. It's good to be on here. I've been listening to the show for a few years, so it's really cool to actually be a guest on it. So I'm really excited. I just moved to Linn County after spending the last 8 years in Union County. The last year and a half I was there, I was elected chair of the Union County Republican Party, and that was a pretty great honor to be able to make those relationships and connections over time and be chosen for that position. And I think I got a lot of really good work done. Other things I do, I am a journalist in my spare time. I am the news director at EO Live TV, which is the internet news station in La Grande. Even though I live in Linn County, a lot of that's remote, so I still do news stuff over there. I'm the treasurer of Young Republicans of Oregon. I just got involved in Linn County Republicans. Then I've moved over here. Way back in the day, I was the president of the EOU College Republicans, and that's kind of how I got my start in Republican politics in Oregon. 2014, I moved to La Grande from a little town called Los Angeles, and decided to see what it was like, and really got addicted to the Oregon way of things, I guess. And that's kind of what I've been doing. Spent the last 8 years working on campaigns all over the place, presidential campaigns, governor's races, that kind of thing. It's been an interesting ride.
Yeah. I ask if you were at Eastern Oregon, were you like a poli-sci or government major or anything over there?
Yeah, so at EOU, I double majored in public administration and politics, economics. The first cool political office I held is that I was the student member of my community college's board of trustees, and I got turned on to the wonderful world of public administration, which is all about the nuts and bolts of public policy. You learn how to write budgets and fun things like that. So that's what I realized I really wanted to do. So currently, my day job is that I am a city manager. I'm the city recorder of the city of Sotaville. So all it paid off.
Have you considered running for Metro Council? Just
yeah, it's a little far away from Linn County, unless I could, register to vote at one of your houses. I guess it's probably not going to work out.
Well, I just wanted to say I appreciate you being involved in the party. I think that's kind of taken not take advantage, but a lot of people who say they're involved are not involved in the party at all. And I think that that's an integral part of being an activist in not just in Oregon, but in general. I know Nick and I know a lot of Republicans who've kind of given up on the party. And, you know, every time something crazy happens, I take a deep breath and I remind myself, this is why I'm involved, is because if I leave, the only people left are the ones pushing this stuff. So you recently withdrew your interest in the ORP Treasurer position. I'm curious what kind of influenced that decision and why you decided to run and then kind of pull your name out.
So it's something I had thought about for a little while. At the last Central Committee meeting that the state held, which was where they talked about the NAV participation proposal, which I thought was a good idea, but had some pitfalls that needed to be changed legislatively before it was approved.
So real quick, just some definitions. Central Committee is where every county sends delegates. And so it's a group of 200 plus leaders from around the state, and NAV, non-affiliated voter. So the proposal was to allow non-affiliated voters to vote in the Republican primary. All right, carry on.
Yeah, so another friend of the pod, Stephen Lloyd, was there that day. And at the end of it, I asked him what just happened. And he said, we spent 8 hours talking and got nothing accomplished, which is the best summary I could give for that day. It was just 8 hours of vitriol and anger and people just kind of beating on each other, not for any good reason other than people were mad. And it was just a really painful moment to watch. So my thought was like, well, the ORP needs to have something that is sequestered away from drama. There's an opening for treasurer. I know how to be a treasurer. I've done that several times as a government administrator, political campaigns, that kind of thing. So that is one thing I know I can do, and one thing I know I can sequester from the drama. So that was the idea behind it. The thing that led me to drop out is that a few weeks ago I attended an executive committee meeting. So separate from the Central Committee, it's the chairs and vice chairs of the CD organizations, the 6 party officers, and the finance chair and the PCP chair. So those were like 20 people or so, something like that, on that group. And that was kind of
like a steering committee, essentially.
Yeah, and that was ultimately kind of a microcosm of all the problems with the ORP. It was 3 hours of a bunch of miserable armchair parliamentarians yelling at each other about nothing. It seems like there may be some real legal problems with the way the vacancy in the treasurer position has been handled. The end after 2 hours of discussion was not to solve the problems, but maybe talk about it later, and also surprise vote to appropriate $5,000 for an audit of the party's finances. And there was one no vote. And that person said, I'm voting no because this wasn't appropriated in the budget. And it was like, okay, that's a big problem. And somebody else afterward was like, yeah, there is money. So like, there's not even a straight answer. There's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. One of my favorite quotes is that speculation is the enemy of calm. And there was 3 hours of speculation, which meant 3 hours of no calm. And that was all that was. And I sat back for a while thinking about everything it would take to win, whipping votes, getting endorsement, all of that. And I thought, I could definitely do it, but this is not worth it. Like, if this is what it's going to be a couple times a month, maybe once every week, for as long as it goes on, it's just going to be a bunch of miserable people berating each other. Like, if I spent the next 8 months watching paint dry, it would be a better service to the party than whatever this is. So I
was going to say Armchair Parliamentarians was actually the name of a ska band that I was briefly a part of in undergrad. So it's funny that you referenced that. All in good time. Find us on Spotify. No, just kidding. No part of that is true. Don't do that. But I was going to say, was there is there another candidate who had also put his or her name forward that you're like, this person, also kind of like has a good grip on stuff and is really going to be able to make steps forward for the party? Or was it just that for you yourself to go through the process at this point in time and see the maybe less than whole amount of work that you'd be able to get done, or less than, Sisyphean progress you'd be able to make? You just said, maybe 2 years or 4 years from now, it would be better time of my use, because if you're obviously willing to put in the work, but you want to make sure that you're going to be able to get the results from it, and you're not just kind of shouting into the wind or something like that. Was it one of those two, or?
It was kind of a mix of both. So the one person who has officially filed is Carol Williams. She's a Central Committee delegate from Marion County. In all of my interactions with her, she's been a really wonderful person. She's got a lot of experience as a bookkeeper, so she's going to have no problem keeping the ORP's finances up to snuff. I think she's going to do an excellent job in that role. I know, was it at the Central Committee meeting James and I were at last summer? Yeah, there was so I had a motion a couple of days before the meeting. A couple of recalls had been announced against 2 Republican senators. So during the kind of open forum part, I came up with a motion to say, hey, can the ORP put out a statement saying we oppose the recall of all incumbent Republican state legislators? And it was killed with like 90% of the vote, because the 2 people who were under recall were the senators who had just introduced Senate Bill 865. And I was faced with the looming specter of having to fight 2 recall elections rather than build up the party and prepare for other elections that were upcoming. I was like, okay, if the ORP can take a stand and say, hey guys, no recalls, they would stand down. The motion failed by like 90%, something like that. That would be about my time. James might have a different estimation, but it was pretty resounding to kill the motion.
I voted against it, and not because it's not something I disagreed with. It just from a procedural perspective, I think that's something that needed a bit more debate and discussion. And I thought it should have been on the agenda, not brought up in the open forum. That was all it was. It was at the tail end of a very long day, and that sort of thing I felt like needed a lot more discussion before being voted upon. And it to me, it didn't feel like the time or the place. So apologies for not backing you.
No, that's a very reasonable reason to vote no, and I'm all good. There's no hard feelings there. It's just politics, and it's just procedure, and we were all pretty tired. I had to drive back to the Grand at the end of that day. So
it was Chuck Thompson, and who was the other one?
It was Bill Hansel and Lynn Finley.
Oh, okay, that was a different. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
and very curious.
Yeah. So after that meeting, Carol was one of the people who came up to talk to me and go, hey, that's a really good thing. We need to be opposing the recall of these people. And she, helped prompt the Marion County Republican Party to put out a statement saying that they oppose recalls but recalls of our state legislators to kind of discourage those people. So that was a really great thing that she did, and I'm very thankful that she did that for Eastern Oregon. So when it comes to evaluating her as somebody who can be a good leader, every interaction I've had has been very positive, and she has lots of experience. The reasons that I thought I could contribute something as treasurer beyond just being good at bookkeeping, given my professional background, was I wanted there to be somebody under 30 on the executive committee. I thought that would be really cool. I think Dallas might have been the youngest one there at 36, maybe Jessica Davidson or Kevin Moss, but there's nobody under 30 up there that I understand. And I also wanted there to be somebody from outside the I-5 corridor serving as an officer. Serving as an officer, I thought it'd be cool to have somebody who's connected with donors and elected officials and activists over there, so that we can really keep those people looped into the party. And Carol, again, great at bookkeeping, great friend to Eastern Oregon. She doesn't have the connections, and she's not under 30, which not a bad thing, but those were things that I thought I could contribute that she couldn't. So
yeah, makes sense.
Very cool.
But then beyond that, it was just seeing that dysfunction and going, goodness, there are so many better things I could be doing with my time. Carol's going to take care of the books. I'm going to find a campaign to work on. I will work with Lynn County Republicans where I'm now with PCP, and that'll be what I'll be doing with my time. So that was what drove my decision, was just watching the dysfunction there. An abundant majority of the executive committee just seemed more concerned with opposing Dallas than opposing Tina Kotek. So it's like, great, I'm gonna go somewhere where that's not the goal.
One of the frustrating things about party politics is that it's all bottoms up. There is no strong leadership by design. And I don't know, maybe the Democrats have a better system, or I think the design is similar, but maybe they have a bit more authoritarianism in their blood, that they are okay with one person calling the shots. But you're basically at the county level, You sign up to be a precinct committee person, which is trivial. Everyone should do it. And then the PCPs elect delegates. The delegates then represent the central committee at the state level. And so it's a little bit different how you get the executive committee, because you have the CD chairs, the congressional. I'm actually not entirely sure how they get chosen.
Oh yeah,
but
that's to explain.
What's that?
At the presidential delegate selection committee every 4 years, that's when the CD officers are elected for 4-year terms.
Okay, got it. So they, I mean, just for the listeners, they serve a similar function as a sort of like a county chair, except it's for the congressional districts, and there's really no county. They just are a leadership team that serves on the executive committee. But what you end up with is the chairman, who is supposed to be leading the party, really is at the mercy of the group, the collected body, I guess. And if you have made some enemies with the executive committee, you have a hard time getting stuff done. And so a few weeks after, or maybe even 1 week after you pulled your nomination or your interest in the treasurer, Dallas Hurd, the chairman, resigned, citing the same kind of dysfunction that you're referring to here, which I think was a bit telling about what's going on. And I'm not totally, this is inside baseball, I'm not totally convinced that they're doing that appropriately either. I'm not super familiar with the ORP bylaws, but typically when a chairman resigns, the vice chair holds the position until a new chair can be elected by the full body, which would be the central committee. I think what they've decided to do is just take the vice chair, shift them up to chair, and now they're running an election for vice chair, which I don't believe is correct. But again, what do I know? I lent out my Robert's Rules book, so I'd have to. But it just shows that what's going on there, and it's very frustrating. But like I said, my thought process is I can be that voice of reason, kind of like what you were talking about, what you were trying to do. I can stand in the gap and kind of be one more voice of just not whatever the opposite of dysfunction is. Function,
yeah.
Anti-dysfunction.
I would hope, yeah. So Alex, I was kind of curious. You had been the chair of a county party that's certainly a lot more rural than what James and I are used to in Multnomah County, where there's a lot of obviously urban interests.
I'm in Washington.
I'm sorry?
I'm in Washington County now.
Well, yeah, that's there you go. But a lot more than kind of what we're used to. And I was kind of curious for your thoughts on what it was like to manage to run a party where we're interested in, as Republicans, and putting forward good policy, moving Oregon forward, getting businesses to move here, getting taxes lowered so that the state can become affordable. You see counties all over the place trying to join Greater Idaho and state of Jefferson and all stuff like that. But as a more rural community, I would perhaps stereotypically and perhaps misinformedly assume that a lot of the folks out there are more likely to be, farther to the right, diehard Trump supporters, stuff like that, versus, although we frankly have a fair few in Multnomah County ourselves, and I think there's a lot of them in leadership positions at the county GOP. But I think that there might be a lot more interests with the farther end of the party than more the centrist end of the party. Did you kind of find a juxtaposition in managing those two, or were you able to kind of helm the ship in such a way that you're able to get everybody rowing in the same direction and still move forward with what you thought was a good policy and appropriate work for the Union County GOP to be doing?
I found a lot of the people who were really interested in attending the Union County Republicans meeting and being involved were a lot more policy focused than you would expect. The lay conservative over there is probably thinking a lot more about ideological things, but we talked a lot more about policy and party work, a lot more than you'd probably expect. Again, for that, I think your read of the people over there is pretty correct. People love Donald Trump. People love, what's her name, Marjorie Taylor Greene. All those. The far right is very popular over in Eastern Oregon. I don't personally use that as a pejorative myself. I think it's just kind of where people are at. especially in rural Oregon, Democratic policies and federal policies have just been hammering the place for decades. Like, yeah, of course people are going to be as far to the opposite of whatever that is. That it's kind of a no-brainer that people voted for Trump because Trump was like, hey, timber's cool, things like that. Farming's cool. They had 8 years of Obama and they were like, God, his farming policies are miserable. So yeah, whatever the opposite of that is, we're going to go for. The rhetoric was just kind of there to get people interested in adopting policies and supporting candidates whose policies were helpful for the area economically. I know, there was still a bit of interest in principle. If you remember, James and I were both at the immigration caucus of the platform meeting. And what we did was, we have this vision of the platform just being a statement of principles rather than, a very long list of things we want to do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was, after I went there, I gave my report. Here's what we do. And everybody's like, yeah, that's great. We should be simplifying things and making it easier to understand. They weren't like, oh, what did you do to X, Y, and Z thing? They're like, great, this is awesome. This is what we need. The county party had its own platform itself that again was very, very conservative. But we wanted to be able to vet candidates who came to ask us for our support. And I think that's the reason the county wrote its own platform. But at the end of the day, we were still very policy oriented. One of our PCPs, my replacement was the mayor of Elgin forever. So he's a very sharp policy guy. One of our county commissioners was a PCP. We had, scientists, people who work for USDA, just really people from all stripes who are in their day jobs usually have very technical things that they do. So when it came down to go, okay, what kind of candidates should we support? What kind of policies should we be supporting? A lot of the conversations at the central committee meetings ultimately came down to policy rather than rhetoric.
So that's honestly, that's awesome for two reasons. The first of which is a shameless plug because James and I and a couple of our friends had done an episode on here in which we eviscerated the ORP platform for being both very arduously specific for stuff that it has no reason being specific about, but also because it, I don't think, really represents where a lot of the Republicans in the state of Oregon are, and we just need a statement of principles, kind of like what you're talking about. If it can't fit on the back of a postcard, it's probably too specific for a state party guiding philosophy. But the second reason is if I could, I would get your entire answer just plastered on a bumper sticker and just pasted around, because I asked the question the way that I did, because that's, I feel like, a pretty common view, certainly in Portland and perhaps in Multnomah County and kind of on I-5 down into Salem and into Eugene and whatever, that there's this amount of dismissiveness of folks east of the Cascades because, like, well, that's, a more sparsely populated part of the state, and that's all they're interested in is their own farms, and there's not a lot of depth or heft for policy. If you want policy specifics, you need to talk to people in Salem, you need to talk to people in Portland. And it's, yeah, exactly, yeah, you get that arrow because we get that all the time in Portland and in Multnomah County, and it's like, it's such sure that James and I did not vote for Donald Trump, and there's a lot of individuals in a lot of different parts of the state that, well, I say the state, I'm not in Oregon right now, in Palm Springs. You can see all the sun behind me. That's not Oregon. We don't have that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of folks in Oregon who did vote for Donald Trump, and it's so easy to just dismiss out of hand anybody who supports Trump or any of the conservative policies as somebody who's not serious as a public policy thinker, when in fact the exact opposite is true. And there's probably a lot more heft and a lot more depth from a lot of those individuals than there is from something we get at Multnomah County on the GOP level or the city as a whole, because all they want to do is talk about hippie lefty Democrat stuff and don't care a wig about the entire rest of the state. And they just assume food's always going to show up, and they always assume livestock is going to work the way that it needs to, and timber is just going to be available and whatever, and never take any more than a couple seconds to think about how these processes actually work, where it's, for a lot of other parts of the state, that's both the area of subject matter expertise and people's livelihood. You have to know how that stuff works. So it's interesting, and it's refreshing to hear you say that there's a lot more policy heft than I think a lot of individuals in Portland would assume.
Oh, yeah. Like, we can point to one. We had an event for Christine Drees, and she came out and we wanted to get some people there to meet with her a few months ago. And the big topic of conversation, it probably took up about half the time possibly, was like wolf policy. And I think the stereotype is that Eastern Oregon were like, oh, we don't like these wolves, and the western side is like, oh, they're natural, they're part of the environment, you should just leave them there. Never mind the fact that they aren't in Western Oregon, they're over here, killing livestock. The thing that was brought up were a couple of problems. One is that the wolves are here, they're killing livestock, they're killing animals. Occasionally they kill people. That's a lot more rare, but still they're killing livestock. When they don't kill livestock, when there is a kill, it's usually around a lot more cattle, and the trauma will actually harm the cattle beyond the point of usability in a number of cases, especially if a cow is pregnant and there's wolves in the pen and they're being chased around. That pregnant cow will miscarry. Like it's very rare that it doesn't. So right now there is a state compensation fund. I think it's like $400,000 or something like that, to compensate just for predation. So a cow has to die. It's not a cow was injured or sustained trauma that ruined the animal as a result, or a cow miscarried. It's just the cow died. And also the discretion about whether or not it was a wolf is left to an ODFW employee who can, apropos of no evidence at all, go, no, it wasn't wolf kill. And that is the limit of the accountability. It's just whether or not they want to report it that day. So, Bobby Levy, the state representative over there, had a bill this session to increase the fund for $1 million over the biennium from the $400,000 it currently is at. And I saw a letter somebody sent to Vicky Breeze Iverson going, you shouldn't do that. Farmers lie about how many cattle are killed. They don't even need $400,000. Like, oh, that's great. What's really happening is the state is being misleading about how many wolf predations there are and just how bad the scale of the problem is. And that is problematic. Wolves are even in the Grand Ronde Valley where everybody is over there. They come down in the valley. Wolf packs are there. They go in. They hunt livestock, and they're in the hills. Even Mount Emily Recreation Area is the big fun place where people like to go hiking, right next to the Grand. And there are wolves on that hill. So people also call us crazy for being so nuts about guns. Well, there are predators in your daily life. So of course you're carrying a gun around all the time. There might be a cougar showing up in your backyard. You go up into the hill just for a little hike. You might see a wolf, you might see a bear. Of course you're carrying a gun. Like, moving in Lynn County, I haven't really had a need to bring my gun out a whole lot because there's no predators around here and it's a pretty safe neighborhood. I was carrying all the time in Eastern Oregon because I was out and about often enough in places where there are predators that, it made sense to have a firearm. And the situations where you possibly need one they're just a lot more rampant over there. So yeah, that's the juxtaposition of policy and conservatism
Interesting.
for Eastern Oregon.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say they probably did not increase that to $1 million.
I'm going to have to go look at the appropriation again. I think it failed, but I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm just guessing. That's such a foreign thing to those of us who live in the city, that wolves killing livestock. I mean, you think about it, but I think one of the things that really kind of made it clear to me how stark that divide was when we had those wildfires a year or two ago, and the smoke blew into Portland, and so the Portlanders were, oh, I can't ride my bike in the smoke because the air quality sucks. And I'm just talking to people like Shelley Bosser Davis and people who lived out in the middle of it, and that destroyed hundreds, thousands of lives. And Portland only just became aware of it because people couldn't bike to work. They had to drive their Prius instead. And I'm just like, what a self-centered, group of people that you only care about something because it ruined your your commute and your air quality, which, air quality is important, but compared to what people were dealing with just to the east of us, it was nothing. But that's what it took to make Eastern Oregon problems, visible to Portlanders, was air quality.
I can't have my craft IPA sitting outside anymore.
I know.
Oh my God. Yeah, in the summer we call that Tuesday. That's just basically 3 months of smoke you get. It's lots and lots of fun to live through. Yeah, my previous government job, I was the manager of Oregon's only translator district. So they operated television towers in Northeast Oregon. And one summer there was a fire on that mountaintop. So we were about to lose, millions of dollars of infrastructure, not just used by the television station, but also by OPB, Oregon State Police, USDA, like several radio stations. It was a lot of that. Oh, the ISP that served, wireless internet for east of the valley, like all of that gone because the forest land up there is just managed so poorly that things just burned down. And, in one day we might have almost lost all of it. So
I've been talking to people who, in my Metro Council race, talking to some of the farmers and folks who live outside the urban growth boundary, but that is being encroached upon by Metro, and not so much by the urban growth boundary, but what Metro's doing is just buying up land outside the urban growth boundary, using a lot of times, I believe, park funds to buy just whatever, and then they don't manage it because they're a bunch of city people like me. They don't know how to manage a forest. And so it just goes unmanaged. And there were actually fires in Western Washington County. I think this last summer, maybe 2 summers ago, smaller ones, not to the extent that we had in the Cascades, but we had wildfires because of unmanaged land, and a lot of it belonging to Metro. So it's a, I get it, big problem. And you need to manage forests. You can't just buy them and sit on them, or else they burn down. It's unfortunate.
Well, and to the point that Alex made earlier, I think it's also you need informed information and policy ideas from the folks who's kind of, that's their life. It's not, Tina Kotek can't just go through and decide it's like, all right, here's the best way to fight forest fires. Like, all right, cool, you got a lot of forest fires, you got a lot of lumber in North Portland as you walk to your pho place in the morning or whatever. It's just like, yeah, man, that's not quite that. You're maybe not the subject matter expert on this particular piece of public policy here. But Alex, so you're now a PCP in Lynn County after chairing the Union County GOP. What is, as somebody who's kind of like worn 2 different hats, what's it like going from one of the, and I get, if you're in Lynn, are you, Eugene is Lynn County, right?
That's Lane County.
It's Lane, okay. So it's also still going to be a relatively rural district. It's going to be close to more similar to what you had. But is there like a compare and contrast, or is there just like, it's just a different set of people and you're more tuned into obviously the policies of, west of the Cascades, I-5 type thing, coastal area probably?
Well, you'd be surprised. So I was born in Nashville, grew up in Los Angeles, and then spent the last 8 years in Eastern Oregon. And now for the first time in my life, I have a Democratic congressman for the very first time. I was represented by the one Republican congressman in LA County, or like the one Republican district for all the time I lived there. And now I'm suddenly not there anymore. So not having a Democratic congressman anymore is interesting. But the news is good for Lynn County. The redistricting looks like it's been good to us. It's going to be a lot more red. So I live in the city of Lebanon. I'm the manager of the city of Sotaville, which is right across. And the boundary line between Jamie Cates district and Marty Wilde's district is right in between those 2 cities. And that is being pushed way down. So now all of it's going to be in Jamie Cates district. So everywhere I look, things are good. I'm going to keep my Republican state legislators. We've got really good Republicans on the county commissioners. And who knows, CD5 is kind of a wild card. We'll see what happens. I mean, Kirk Schrader's a pretty moderate guy, and he's been there for a really long time.
Well, he's being attacked from the left by Jimmy McLeod Skinner. So he might not even make it through the primary, which would be not interesting.
Yeah, well, her grassroots game has always been really good. I got to see it in person in Eastern Oregon several years ago. Of course, we killed it, but it's because there are like 5 Democrats in CD2. So, but she got all 5 of them and a couple of Republicans to vote for her. So, she's probably going to be able to do a much better job in CD5.
The last article I read is that she had a couple of county parties endorse her. So county Democratic parties endorse her, and Marianne being the biggest one, which is unusual. I don't think the Republicans, we endorse anyone in the primary. And then in the general, of course, we endorse whoever the Republican is, but very unusual. But reading the headline and then knowing how parties work, it almost doesn't surprise me if again, coming back to Nick's comment about our interactions with the Multnomah County GOP, it was about 45 people in the Multnomah County GOP, and it was probably the 45 most extreme Republicans in the entire county were the ones who were part of that group. I could imagine something similar on the Democratic side, where the people who show up to meetings and the people who want to go be a part of the party are the most extreme. And McLeod Skinner is quite a bit further to the left than Schrader is. So just interesting dynamics on the left there. But I'm kind of in the opposite boat, where I have never been represented by a Republican congressman. I was in Blumenauer's district, and now I'm in Bonavici's district, and I have no interaction with either of them. You know, it's funny being involved in the party. You get to know people. You get to, you know, basically, I would, not every Republican in elected office, but a lot of them I know personally. I have never met the congressman who represents me or been in the same room with them. It's
Suzanne Bonamici, if you're listening, come on the pod.
I
don't know if that's going to work.
Probably not.
But well, so Alex, depending on if it's Jimmy or Lori DeReamer, whoever gets through the primary, if they can go on and win and beat Jamie McLeod Skinner, we're saying that they've got you to thank. So we'll get a nice and gloss thank you note from Congressman Crumpacker, Congressman DeReamer.
Yeah, I'm hoping Congressman DeReamer, because I just like her more. But you know, whoever it is.
I'm a Lori DeReamer fan as well, but
friend of the pod. Also, she's been on.
Yes. She's been on. Jimmy, if you want to come pitch your case, we'd love to have you as well.
You know, it's been interesting to watch his change in tactics, because he ran for CD2 in 2020. And yeah, I watched him there, and his campaign was basically the entirety of his message was, "I am a Trump clone, vote for me." And that was it. There was not really any other substance or policy behind that. I am Donald Trump 2.0. If you want that in Congress, I'm your man.
And throw a bunch of money behind it, like
exactly. He gave the speech at Linn County Republicans last night, and it was completely the opposite of the way he was talking. You know, he's still presenting as conservative, obviously, but it was less about "I am Donald Trump 2.0" and more than "I'm Jimmy and I believe the things you believe." So it was very interesting to watch that change in rhetoric.
Yeah, interesting. And speaking of, he's another one of those guys who's not involved in the party at all. I don't even know that he's a PCP. I never seen him at meetings. I don't see him around. It makes it difficult to support someone who has never been around, you know, who just flips a switch and all of a sudden they want to go run for Congress. So
I'll, in the spirit of at least moving on from Duncan on Jimmy, not that I'm not supportive of Lori DeReamer if I were voting in her district, but I think, James, that's actually a really good point, is if for somebody that's not involved in the machinations of the party and somebody who doesn't maybe have those relationships with some of the grassroots, Alex, again, as somebody who's now been involved in 2 county parties and has run one of them, what's some of the things that you learn and pick up and kind of figure out how to do? I mean, is it solely about building the relationships? Is it solely about having something on a CV where you say, look, I show up to stuff, I'm involved? Or what are some of the benefits for, we say this all the time, anybody who listens to this podcast, go be a PCP, find a way to get involved. Like, it's not just about running for Congress or running for governor. Like, you have to do stuff at this level and then kind of work your way up. But why do you feel that that's important to go do that?
You know, I was always at a town hall for a representative over in Northeast Oregon, Bobby Levy, the other day, and somebody asked her, "What can Republicans do to win?" And she said, "Vote Republican." And I was like, "No, that's like 1% of it, maybe. You have to volunteer Republican. If you really care about getting good people with good policy elected, you have to make phone calls and you have to knock on doors. Otherwise, they aren't going to win. Field wins elections. Sometimes you have a lot of earned media that wins you elections. Sometimes, usually not the case. I think Donald Trump on that point is a little more of an aberration than the rule. In Union County, we won elections in 3 counties in the total times I was there, because I organized the deployment of volunteers in races. So we won a school board election in Union County. The one candidate came to us and said, "Hey, I'm running for the school board of Imbler. It's a small town over there. Please help me campaign." We sat down, we cracked open the data that the ORP gave us, and we made phone calls to every person there. We called every Republican and said, this guy's endorsed by the Republicans, he's got good policy, vote for him. We called up every non-Republican and said, this guy's got good policy, vote for him, and he won. Then we were like, okay, what else can we do? Because Embler is a relatively small community. It's not like 1 million people's living there. We started talking to other people, and Coos County was like, hey, we need to win some elections. And I was like, great, let's have people make phone calls for your elections. So Coos County gave us a calling list, and a couple of the people that we called for won their elections in Coos County during that special district election. And then we deployed volunteers to make a few hundred phone calls during the, the Newburgh School Board recall. And we helped turn the tide over there. So I don't remember what the balance of that was, but you can attribute probably 200 of those yes votes to us calling people and making sure that they vote and support the candidates who are trying to be recalled. So that's really what you get to do as a PCP, is that you get plugged into an organization that has the capabilities to turn elections around, as long as you're willing to put in the work. A lot of the people at Union County Republicans didn't really want to sit there and make phone calls all day. But the people who did ended up sitting down and doing it, and we were winning elections. We would go to county fairs, and every single fair that summer, we had a Republican booth, and we were talking to people about what the policy stands for, letting them know how they can get involved, helping people register to vote, that kind of thing. So that's what you get if you're going to be a PCP. You just have to make sure your county party is willing to do something. And if your county party leadership is a little ambivalent, you can go, well, hey, here's something I want to do. Can we make that happen? I want to, help somebody who's running for city council who is conservative in my town. Can I have the county's voter data for that city, and make those phone calls and get a few friends together to run, that kind of person. So that's the big benefits, I would say, that come from being a PCP, is that you are the foot soldier of the party. You get to go there and you get to make decisions and get things done. I guess the other thing is a little more rare, is that PCPs are in charge of appointing vacancies in the legislature, and in counties with partisan county commissioner races, you appoint the vacancies on your county commissioners if they're in that party. So you get a lot of power as a political person. If your senator or your state representative or your partisan county commissioner becomes vacant, you're in charge of appointing their replacements.
I would say that's absolutely right. Just to add to that, though, on an individual level, I think it just shows that you are willing to be a part of the community and not just do stuff for your own benefit. I mean, every politician, I think, to a certain extent, is doing it because of ego or because of, they want to see their name in the paper. But if you're a part of your party, at least you know people and people know you, and the people who matter at least have heard your name. And I'm talking to these people running for governor who have never done anything for the party, and they think they're just going to go jump to the highest level. I mean, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into, and being a PCP is step one to figuring that out. So I see it as the baseline. The number one thing that you should do if you want to be involved in politics is become a PCP. If you ever want to run for elected office, if you ever want to do anything politically, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
So very true.
I agree.
Jimbo.
On that note, I'd add, the other good place to go is for your cities and your local governments. Always have committees that are appointed that they need people on. The thing that makes me really mad about the candidates who have no government experience, like, oh, I'm a total outsider. Okay, so you're telling me that every single local government board, committee, commission in your community is 100% fully staffed. It would be the only one in the state. You are not doing anybody any favors by running for governor instead of volunteering on your parks budget committee. Like, that's something you need to do. You don't need to run for governor. You need to sit down for a meeting every year and vote on a budget. So,
and it's boring. It shows that you can get through the boring parts of being I've complained about this in the past too. Everybody wants to go to protests. Everyone wants to make a sign and go yell at people. That's not where change is made. Change is made at your city council meetings, at your parks budget committee meeting, and it's boring. Change is boring. Making a difference is boring, and you have to, show that you're willing to do the boring part if you want to go run for governor or Congress or fill in the blank. So I have a hard time supporting candidates who have no government experience. And I mean, PCP is the bare minimum. So
Yeah.
anyway, we are
Here, here.
running a bit short on time. Nick, did you have one other thing you want to say? Did I cut you
No,
off?
I was going to say exactly that. And again, I like, we've got several bumper stickers already made. May your words ring true, both of you guys, because that is absolutely, could not have said it better myself or been more informed myself about how important it is to go through and do all these things. Listeners, and I guess viewers, since we're on there's usually like 3 people who watch on YouTube, but we're on YouTube. Go be a PCB. If you live in Oregon, go be a PCB. But we are coming up here at the end. Alex, we have one question we always ask our guests at the end of the show. Who is your favorite Republican and why?
So the 2 ones that I would have to go for would be Jeb Bush and Dennis Richardson. So I was an intern on Jeb Bush's campaign in 2016, and he was the kind of policy guy who had an answer for everything. Just any question you could ask him, he was like, yeah, here's what we can do. And I think that kind of, you heard him during one of the debates. He was asked something about regulating like fantasy football, and he had an answer because that's just what he's thinking about. And Chris Christie was like, wow, you're dumb. We got ISIS to think about. Don't talk about fantasy football regulations. Well, okay, that wasn't the question, but it might be the question. So like, that was cool. Being so entrenched in the world of policy that you have an answer, pretty big. Dennis Richardson, he's the closest thing we'll get to a Republican statesman for our generation, I think, for a while. I'm really hoping we can pull off a governor's race this fall, but that's going to be a tough one. So he's the big Republican that everybody knew. I only met him a few times, but all of our interactions were always super positive. He demonstrated a willingness to be a servant to the people. I think when you're in a position like that, God puts you on a pedestal. It's to look out for people, not look down on them. And he really emphasized looking out for people. He was a state legislator, a city councilor, and a secretary of state. And he used that to look out for people. So really good lessons from him about being a servant leader.
Awesome.
And lessons for all of us.
Thank you again for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun talking to you about the minutia of the ORP and becoming a PCB. So thanks again. And listeners, we'll talk to you next time.
You're welcome. See you later. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Rational Republican Podcast. Your hosts are James Ball and Nick Perlosky. The show today is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors of Portland, serving the greater Portland metro area for all your garage door installation and repair needs. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can email us at james@jamesaball.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can find our episodes at jamesaball.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts.